Bradley, since when do we drive luxury cars? My mother-in-law, Carol exclaimed, her gaze sweeping over the sleek, black vehicle parked in their driveway. Well, Nancy's parents insisted we use their car for today, Bradley replied, a mischievous glint in his eye. My parents stepped out, subtly flaunting their high-end wardrobes. I straightened my skirt and walked up to Carol. I could feel her eyes appraising me, not missing the tiniest detail. Hi, Carol. It's good to see you. She gave a tight-lipped smile that didn't reach her eyes. Nancy? Bradley joined us, putting a comforting hand on my back. Mom, Dad, this is Nancy's family, David and Susan. And this is Josh. Nice to meet you, David said, extending his hand. Carol barely shook it, her eyes darting behind him. So, what line of work are you in? She asked, her tone dripping with condescension. I run a tech startup, David replied calmly, ignoring her disdain. Interesting, she said, clearly uninterested. Her eyes flickered over to Bradley. Why don't we go inside? We all followed Carol into the house, where Jenna was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone. Without looking up, she muttered, Oh, it's you guys. Bradley shot me an apologetic look. Jenna, can you at least pretend to be hospitable? Jenna shrugged, finally looking up and making eye contact with me. Nancy, love the dress. Very vintage. Thanks, Jenna, I replied, forcing a smile. Bradley's father, Robert, sauntered in, glancing at us like we were a disruption. Bradley, he said, barely nodding in my direction. Nancy. Hey, Dad, Bradley responded. This is Nancy's family. Robert acknowledged them with a cursory nod, then turned to Carol. Shall we? It was clear this gathering wasn't going to be a friendly family union. Carol led the way to the dining room, where a lavish brunch was laid out. My parents took their seats, doing their best to maintain a calm demeanor under the icy reception. As we sat down, Carol started talking about her latest charity event, her voice dripping with a sense of superiority. It was a grand affair. Only the elite of the city were invited, of course. Sounds delightful, Susan chimed in, trying to keep the conversation light. I'd love to hear more about it. Carol's eyes narrowed slightly. Oh, I doubt it's anything you'd be interested in, dear. Fighting back the urge to roll my eyes, I focused on my plate. Bradley squeezed my hand under the table, a silent gesture of support. So, Josh, what do you do for a living? Jenna asked, her tone surprisingly devoid of her usual sarcasm. I work in international tech relations, he said, his tone casual but firm. Oh, Jenna muttered, clearly not expecting a solid response. The rest of the brunch was filled with awkward pauses and forced small talk. Carol and Robert maintained their aloof demeanor, while Jenna alternated between half-hearted attempts at conversation and ignoring us altogether. As we finished up, Carol finally addressed Bradley directly. So, what's the plan for the rest of the day? We thought we'd show Nancy's family around town, Bradley said, smiling at me. Give them a taste of the local sights. Carol's eyebrows shot up. Our town isn't exactly touristy. I'm sure we'll manage, I interjected, trying to cut the tension. As we made our way outside, I couldn't help but feel a weight lift off my shoulders. Bradley wrapped an arm around me. You okay? Yeah, I sighed. It's just, you know. He kissed my forehead. I know, but we're in this together, remember? His words warmed my heart. As we got back into the car, I glanced at my family. Their support was my armor, shielding me from the cold judgment of Bradley's family. Together, we'd get through this. The first family dinner at Bradley's parents' house was a night I'll never forget. Carol and Jenna had made their approval, or lack thereof, abundantly clear from the start. As we walked into their grand dining room, the chandelier sparkled overhead, illuminating the tension in the air. Welcome, everyone, Carol said with a tight smile, the tone insincere. Please, take a seat. My parents, David and Susan, exchanged wary glances before sitting down. I grabbed Bradley's hand, feeling his warmth steady me. So, Nancy, Carol began as soon as we were seated, how's your little project management job going? It's going well, thank you, I answered, maintaining my composure. Project management, Jenna interrupted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Must be fulfilling. It is, I responded, trying to keep my tone neutral. Dinner progressed with Carol and Jenna steering the conversation away from anything remotely balanced. Every compliment felt double-edged, every question loaded with judgment. Nancy, have you ever considered improving your style a bit? Jenna asked, eyeing my dress. You know, something more like this? She gestured to her own designer outfit. I'm comfortable with how I dress, I said, smiling politely. But thanks for the suggestion. Bradley's grip tightened around my hand again. He had warned me about his family's elitist attitudes, but experiencing it firsthand was something else entirely. He tried to shift the conversation, but it was like steering a ship against a storm. Halfway through dinner, the doorbell rang. It was one of Bradley's old friends, stopping by unexpectedly. Bradley excused himself to greet him, leaving me momentarily alone with his family. Carol took the opportunity. Nancy, dear, I hope you realize how difficult it is for Bradley to adjust to your world. It must be quite the culture shock. Actually, we're very happy together, I replied, refusing to engage with her baiting. Bradley soon returned and picked up on the hostile atmosphere instantly. Did I miss anything? He asked, eyes narrowing at his mother and sister. Nothing of importance, dear, Carol said dismissively. After dinner, we moved to the living room for coffee. I sat between my parents, their presence a comforting anchor. Jenna's voice cut through the room. It's fascinating, David, that you own a tech startup. Such a humble profession. David smiled. Humbleness has its own rewards, Jenna. Not everything needs to be flaunted. Jenna scoffed, but David's calm demeanor didn't waver. Susan took my hand and whispered, Remember, we're proud of you. Bradley noticed the tension mounting again and decided it was time to leave. Well, it's getting late. Thank you for dinner, Mom. Carol barely acknowledged his gratitude. Drive safely. We stood to leave, and I couldn't help but glance at Bradley's father, Robert. Throughout the evening, he'd been silent, merely observing. As we stepped outside, Bradley paused, looking directly at me. Nancy, I'm sorry for their behavior. It's okay, Bradley, really, I assured him, squeezing his hand. No, it's not, he said, determination in his voice. We'll figure this out, together. We drove home in silence, but the resolve in Bradley's grip around the steering wheel spoke volumes. As we pulled into the driveway, I knew that this wasn't over. Carol and Jenna's disdain had ignited something in us, something we would confront head-on. At home, once we were alone, Bradley took my hands in his. We'll make them see, Nancy, I promise. I nodded, feeling the strength of his resolve merge with my own. Whatever it took, we would face this challenge together. Family was worth fighting for, and we were ready to fight. 3 weeks had passed since that disastrous dinner, but the biting remarks from Carol and Jenna hadn't ceased. If anything, they seemed to gain momentum. Nancy, darling, why don't you join us for tea tomorrow? Carol's voice trilled over the phone one afternoon. We need to discuss the upcoming charity gala. I hesitated, but ultimately agreed, knowing it would be rude to decline. The next day, I found myself sitting across from Carol and Jenna at an upscale tea room, the aroma of freshly brewed tea doing little to soothe my nerves. Carol wasted no time. Nancy, how do you plan to contribute to the auction? It's a vital part of our family's commitment to the community. I sipped my tea, steadying myself. I've thought about offering some project management consulting hours. It's what I do best. Jenna snorted. Do you really think anyone would bid on that? We need something elegant, something that represents our family's stature. Perhaps Bradley and I could donate together. We both have skills to offer, I suggested, trying to navigate their pointed questioning. That's not the point, Nancy, Carol interrupted, her eyes cold. You need to understand that our family has certain standards. It's not just about money, it's about perception. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of subtle jabs and condescending remarks. By the time I left, my head was spinning. The next evening, I lay on the couch, exhausted. Bradley walked in, immediate concern on his face. Rough day? Just another round with your mom and Jenna, I sighed. This time it was about the charity gala. He sat next to me, taking my hand. Nancy, I know they're relentless, but I promise we'll get through this. A few days later, Bradley and I attended another family gathering. This time, Carol's disdain seemed to be in full force. She barely acknowledged us as we walked in, her focus immediately shifting to a conversation with her friends about exclusive vacations. Oh, Bradley, Nancy, Jenna called out from the kitchen as we walked in. Do come and join us. Her smile was anything but friendly as she handed me a glass of wine. So, heard any more comments about your vintage style? I took a deep breath. Actually, yes. My boss said it's a great reflection of our company's creative spirit. Jenna's laugh was sharp. Well, that's unique. Carol entered the room, her eyes scanning me like an appraising critic. Nancy, dear, we've been meaning to talk about your role in the family business. Perhaps you should consider something more traditional. Bradley cut in sharply. Mom, Nancy is perfectly content with her career. We've talked about this. Ignoring him, Carol continued, You must admit, Bradley, that a more conventional path might benefit both of you in the long run. I felt my patience wearing thin. Carol, I appreciate your concern, but Bradley and I are happy with our careers as they are. Bradley's support was unwavering. We're building our life on our terms. The tension in the room was palpable. Jenna, sensing the rising conflict, attempted to steer the conversation. Oh, enough about careers. Let's talk about our new country club membership, shall we? Later that night, Bradley and I sat in our living room, the silence heavy between us. Nancy, I hate seeing you go through this, he said, his voice filled with frustration. We need to find a way to make them see us for who we are, not who they want us to be, I replied. I know, Bradley sighed. And I have an idea. We'll gather your family and come up with a plan. We'll show them that respect isn't bought with money. It's earned. I looked at him, relieved. Thank you, Bradley. Your support means everything to me. He smiled, determination lighting his eyes. We'll face this together, Nancy, whatever it takes. The resolve we shared was a step in the right direction. With a renewed sense of purpose, we prepared ourselves for the battles yet to come, knowing that our love and unity were our strongest weapons. Weeks flew by, but the tension only grew thicker. Carol and Jenna's continual snide remarks were taking a toll on me. I started staying later at work, trying to avoid the venom at family gatherings. But of course, they found ways to ambush me at home. One evening, Bradley and I were finally relaxing when the doorbell rang. Bradley opened it, revealing Carol and Jenna, their faces set in tight smiles. Surprise! Carol sang, stepping inside without waiting for an invite. We were just in the area and thought we'd drop by. Bradley's jaw tightened, but he managed a polite response. Mom, Jenna, this isn't a great time. We were just winding down. Oh, nonsense, dear. Carol dismissed him and plopped herself on our sofa. We won't be long. Jenna sauntered to the kitchen, opening our fridge. Do you have any sparkling water, Nancy? I can't drink tap. I forced a smile and handed her a bottle. Here you go. Bradley shot me a glance as if to say, hang in there. So, Nancy, Carol began in her usual patronizing tone, are you still working those long hours? Seems quite demanding for a project manager. It's fulfilling work, Carol, I replied, keeping my tone even. Yes, well, she sniffed, don't overwork yourself. Wouldn't want you burning out. Bradley jumped in. Mom, Nancy knows what she's doing. Can we just have a pleasant evening? Jenna, sipping her water, smirked. You seem tense, Brad. Anything we can help with? No, Jenna, he bit back. We're fine. They didn't stay long, but their visit left a bitter taste. Once they were gone, I slumped onto the couch, exhausted. Bradley sat beside me, rubbing my shoulders. I'm sorry, Nancy. They just don't quit. I know, I sighed. We need to do something, Brad. The walls were closing in, the relentless harassment straining our bond. That weekend, Bradley decided to have a serious talk with his father. He hoped Robert might help curb Carol's and Jenna's behavior. We went to his parents' mansion, hopeful yet wary. Over coffee, Bradley broached the topic. Dad, we need to talk about Mom and Jenna, Bradley began. Their constant belittling of Nancy is unacceptable. Robert blinked, surprised. Belittling? I'm sure they're just trying to help. Help, Bradley demanded. They're making things unbearable for Nancy. We can't continue like this. Robert frowned. Bradley, our family maintains a certain standard. Maybe Nancy needs to adapt. My heart sank at his words. Bradley stood, furious. Adapt? She's perfect as she is? Or can't you see value beyond your own prejudices? Watch your tone, Robert warned, standing up as well. We've built this life through hard work and status. Maybe Nancy just needs to understand that. Bradley's face turned red with anger. Dad, respect isn't about status. It's about how you treat people. If you can't see that, then you're blinder than I thought. He grabbed my hand, leading us out. We're done here, Dad, he called back, not looking over his shoulder. Back in the car, Bradley's anger was palpable. I'm sorry, Nancy. I hoped he'd understand. It's all right, Brad, I said softly. We'll find another way. Back at home, we sat with my family to devise a new plan. Determination fueled our thoughts, and we knew we had to stand our ground. If they wanted to judge us by their standards, we'd show them we could match them, and more. We'd face their snobbery head-on, with intelligence and dignity. As the evening wore on, a sense of camaraderie filled the room. We were ready to confront the in-laws' arrogance, knowing that true respect and love were worth fighting for. Whatever it took, we would reclaim our peace. The plan was simple yet bold. My family was on board, ready to show Carol and Jenna that their arrogance couldn't crush our spirit. We plotted carefully, every detail considered for maximum impact. One evening, while sipping coffee around our kitchen table, I brought it up. We'll need a car, something that screams luxury. Dad, do you still have connections with that car rental place? David grinned. I'll handle it. Consider it done. Susan chimed in, her eyes sparkling with mischief. And we can spruce up our wardrobes. There's an upscale boutique downtown. Let's turn some heads. Josh, my brother, leaned back casually. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve. I think Jenna will be quite surprised to see how we handle things. The following days were a whirlwind of preparations. We visited the boutique and picked out outfits that oozed sophistication. David secured the car, a stunning Bentley that would make even Carol do a double take. Come D-Day, we gathered at our place, reviewing the plan one last time. Everyone ready? Bradley asked, his voice steady but eyes burning with resolve. Ready, we echoed. We arrived at Carol and Robert's mansion just as a crowd was gathering for their latest event. Heads turned as we pulled up in the Bentley, my family stepping out one by one looking impeccable. Carol spotted us first. Her eyes widened, then narrowed suspiciously. Nancy, Bradley, what an unexpected surprise. Her tone was brittle. Mom, Dad, Jenna, Bradley said, his voice firm. We thought we'd join you tonight and introduce Nancy's family. Jenna sauntered over, her smirk faltering as she took in our attire. David, Susan, Josh, she greeted, her tone failing to conceal her confusion. You look different. David stepped forward, smiling warmly. We wanted to make a good impression. The evening continued, and whispers buzzed around us. Carol and Jenna's friends were clearly intrigued, but our performance was far from over. During dinner, the conversation shifted to business. Jenna couldn't resist a jab. David, remind us again what you do? With a casual air, David replied, Oh, I run a tech startup. We've had a few breakthroughs lately. Carol raised an eyebrow. Breakthroughs? Yes, he continued. We developed a new software that major companies are scrambling to license. Humble beginnings, but it's taken off. Jenna's facade cracked. Tech. Interesting. Josh, ever the charmer, leaned forward. Actually, I've been helping expand our international relations. It's quite fulfilling. The room buzzed with their replies, curiosity growing by the second. Carol's mask slipped, revealing genuine surprise. Well, that's impressive. Bradley's lips twitched in a restrained smile. You see, Mom, Dad, there's more to people than just appearances. Robert, silent thus far, finally spoke. Indeed, it appears we've underestimated your family, Nancy. His tone was less condescending, more reflective. But the crown jewel came when David stood up for a final toast. To family and understanding, and to knowing that real respect isn't bought, it's earned. As he spoke, it was clear. The in-laws' materialistic facade was crumbling. The room's atmosphere shifted, respect and humility slowly creeping in. Later, Bradley and I stood outside, the cool night air refreshing. That was incredible, Bradley said, his eyes glowing with pride. We showed them, I replied, feeling lighter than I had in months. They won't forget this, he added, wrapping his arm around me. No, they won't, I agreed. And maybe, just maybe, they'll finally learn what really matters. As we drove away in the Bentley, my heart swelled with hope. For the first time, it felt like we were truly seen. And that was a victory we'd cherish, long after the headlights dimmed. We decided to keep the momentum going. Our next appearance at Carol and Robert's house was going to be even more unforgettable. This time, we arrived in a Rolls-Royce, causing another wave of shock among the guests. As we stepped out, I felt a thrill of anticipation. Carol and Jenna met us at the door, their expressions a mix of surprise and skepticism. Good evening, Carol, Jenna, I greeted, keeping my voice steady but confident. What an entrance, Jenna said, barely masking her irritation. Is this another one of your parents' cars? David stepped in smoothly. Indeed, we thought it fitting for the occasion. Once inside, everyone's eyes were on us. Carol tried to regain control, her smile strained. Nancy, shall we talk in private? Bradley's grip on my hand tightened. Whatever you have to say to Nancy, you can say in front of everyone. Carol's eyes flashed with anger. Very well, Nancy, I hope you understand that appearances can be deceiving. It's easy to put on a show, but we are concerned with what's underneath. I met her gaze head on. Our appearance tonight is not a show. It's a reflection of who we are and what we are capable of. We've worked hard, just like you. Carol's lips tightened. Hard work is important, yes, but so is knowing one's place. Bradley stepped forward. Mom, Nancy's family deserves respect. They've earned everything they have. Isn't that what our family values? Robert's voice cut through the tension. Carol, we've misjudged them. It's time we acknowledge that. Carol seemed taken aback for a moment, then rallied. Acknowledged what? That they can rent fancy cars and wear designer clothes? This does not change who they fundamentally are. David, calm and dignified, addressed the room. Our success is real, as is our integrity. We have always believed in respect, something this family seems to have overlooked. A murmur ran through the guests. Jenna, sensing a loss of control, whispered loudly to Carol, Are we seriously entertaining this farce? Bradley, his voice unwavering, said, It's not a farce. Look around, Jenna. These are the people you've belittled, yet they stand strong. They deserve your respect. The silence that followed was profound. Carol's face was red with suppressed rage, but she remained silent. Bradley continued, We've done nothing but prove ourselves while being constantly underestimated and disrespected. Josh chose this moment to speak, his tone casual but cutting. Respect should flow both ways. You can't claim to be superior while putting others down. It's not just hypocritical, it's shallow. Carol's mask slipped. You dare speak to me like that? Yes, Josh said simply, because you need to hear it. We stood there, defiant and united, the weight of their judgments crumbling around us. Bradley turned to his father. Dad, will you continue to support this? Robert, for once, looked uncertain. Things do need to change, he finally admitted. Carol glared at her husband, but refrained from speaking. I knew we'd struck a chord. This had been more than an event. It was a shift in the dynamic that had oppressed us for too long. As we left, Carol and Jenna's faces were etched with the realization that their power had waned. Bradley held my hand tightly, pride and relief mingling in his eyes. We did it, he whispered. Yes, we did, I agreed, feeling victory surge within me. Driving away, the sense of unity and triumph was palpable. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming our self-worth. We had challenged their scorn and stood our ground. For the first time, I felt free. Bradley's support and my family's unwavering strength had seen us through. Respect, real respect, was earned, and tonight we had taken a giant step forward in demanding ours. The day of the grand reveal had finally arrived. We assembled early at Bradley's parents' house, ready to host another gathering. This time, my father's success would be the centerpiece, revealing a side Carol and Jenna had never bothered to see. Carol's jaw visibly tightened when she saw the turnout. The driveway was packed with luxury cars, and our family blended in seamlessly. This wasn't just an impression, it was a statement. As we gathered in the sprawling living room, Dad cleared his throat, capturing everyone's attention. Thank you all for coming. I'd like to share a bit about our journey. Our humble beginnings shaped who we are, but they never defined our ceiling. The room fell silent, all eyes on him, Carol's included. She seemed unable to reconcile her preconceived notions with the reality before her. David continued, Our company, though rooted in simplicity, has earned respect in tech circles. We value innovation and hard work over ostentation. Jenna rolled her eyes, but her smirk was less confident. You mean you've been successful all this time and chose not to flaunt it? Correct, David replied calmly. We believe in letting actions speak louder than appearances. Josh took this moment to step in. For example, our latest project has secured multiple international contracts. We're about to expand significantly. Jenna's eyes widened slightly, but she quickly masked it with indifference. As for me, David added, I prefer staying grounded. My joy comes from seeing my family thrive, not from displaying wealth. The sincerity in his words was impossible to ignore. Carol shifted uncomfortably, finally speaking up. Why haven't you mentioned this before? Maybe because you never asked, I replied softly, but with conviction. Bradley joined my side, his support unwavering. Mom, Dad, it's not about money, it's about respect, something I hope you start to understand. Carol's face was flushed with emotion. We never meant any harm. We just wanted the best for our son." Bradley's eyes narrowed. "The best? By hurting the woman I love? By belittling her family?" Robert quietly interjected. "We might have been blinded by our own standards. It's clear we need to reconsider our approach." Jenna, sensing an opportunity, tried to reconcile. "Nancy, maybe we misjudged you. Perhaps it's time we tried harder to understand each other." I looked at her and for the first time saw a glimmer of sincerity. That would be a start. The room seemed lighter, the oppressive air lifting. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was progress. Carol and Jenna needed time to change, but the seeds had been planted. David lifted his glass. "To new beginnings and mutual respect." Everyone raised their glasses, even Carol and Jenna, albeit slowly. The clinking of glasses solidified a tentative peace, one built on new understandings rather than forced agreements. Later, as we headed back to our car, Bradley wrapped his arm around me. "Do you think they'll change?" "I think they'll try," I said, leaning into him. "And that's a start." Driving away, I felt a cautious optimism. The battles of words and pride had taken their toll, but they also cleared paths for potential reconciliation. Bradley and I had faced the storm together, and now we might just be heading toward clearer skies. At home, we sat in the quiet of our living room processing what had unfolded. "Whatever comes next," Bradley said softly, "we face it together." I smiled, feeling a renewed strength. Together. With that, we had not only fought for respect, but had shown that real strength lies in unity and understanding. Whatever the future held, we were ready to face it, side by side. Months passed, and gradually, life took on a new rhythm. Carol and Jenna weren't transformed overnight, but there were changes. Small, yet significant. Our encounters were less strained, and the biting remarks that once filled the air had softened. One sunny afternoon, Bradley and I hosted a barbecue at our place. It was a casual gathering, aimed at bringing both families together. As the smell of grilled food filled the air, David and Robert chatted about tech developments while Josh and Jenna discussed international markets, surprisingly finding common ground. Carol approached me near the grill, a plate of marinated vegetables in her hands. "Mind if I add these?" she asked. "Of course not," I smiled, stepping aside to make space. After a moment of silence, she began, "Nancy, I've been thinking about everything. The events, the revelations, you've shown us a different perspective." I turned to face her, genuinely curious. "And," with a deep breath she continued, "and I realize we've been unfair, judgmental. Bradley loves you, and that should have been enough for us." Her admission was unexpected. "Thank you, Carol. It means a lot to hear you say that." She nodded, her face softening. "It's about time I started treating you like family." We spent the rest of the afternoon in relative peace, the atmosphere light and friendly. Bradley, noticing the change, wrapped his arm around me. "Looks like we're finally getting somewhere." "It feels good," I admitted. "Really good." Towards the evening, as the sky turned golden, David gathered everyone for a toast. "To family, understanding, and new beginnings," he said, lifting his glass. "To new beginnings," everyone echoed, the clink of glasses sealing the sentiment. Even Carol and Jenna seemed genuine in their response. Later, as everyone began to leave, Carol approached us. "Bradley, Nancy," she began, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Thank you for giving us a chance to understand. We still have a lot to learn, but I promise we're trying." Bradley hugged his mom, a rare moment of vulnerability. "Thanks, Mom. That means the world to us." As the last of the guests drove away, Bradley and I stood in the quiet of our backyard, the remnants of the day glowing warmly around us. "Did today really happen?" I asked, almost in disbelief. "It did," Bradley smiled, "and I think it's just the start." The weeks that followed brought more small but meaningful changes. Carol called me more often, asking for my opinion on family matters. Jenna, though still maintaining her sharp demeanor, began showing glimpses of sincerity. One evening, Bradley and I sat on our porch, reflecting on the journey. "Remember when we said we'd face this together?" he asked. "Of course," I replied, resting my head on his shoulder. "And we did." He kissed the top of my head. "I'm so proud of us. Proud of you." "Thank you, Bradley, for standing by me through everything." "No thanks needed," he said softly. "You're my world." As the stars appeared one by one, a sense of peace settled over us. The drama and conflict had given way to a new understanding, a stronger bond. Our relationship, tested by trials, had emerged fortified and unshakable. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, built on mutual respect and unwavering support. We had faced the storm, and now we were enjoying the calm, ready to face whatever the future held. Together,